Okay, so what we are going to do now is jump into the book party. Some of you have already been to these, you know the format. The way I like this to run is a little bit like speed dating. You have 5 minutes max to introduce yourself, your book, and read one poem or an excerpt from the book and stay within the 5 minutes. If you go over, you'll hear my timer go whack, 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 and then you'll have to stop and we'll go to the next person. You've lost your chance to date us. So if you want to pop your book cover up, that's fine. But that's how we're going to play it. And I'm going to kind of leave this on speaker view most of the time. So when we do the recording, what I'm seeing is what the audience will see when we replay this. So Marc, if you will unmute, you are up first. You're still
Actually, since I've never done this or even seen this before, I was wondering if I could go second.
Yes, you may.
Since I've never done this before and I don't know the format, I was wondering if I could maybe go second after somebody who can model it for me. Thank you, Jim.
Absolutely. Let me give you it. Hi, I'm Jim Lewis. I have a new book coming out this spring, hopefully within the next month, not more than 2, called As If a Caress. It's a book that you absolutely need to own. It will be my 4th collection, and I would like to read you a poem from it called Dancing in the Rain, in the Nude, with the Poppies. That's a joke because I have no such poem. But then I would read that poem, and if I'm done and it's not 5 minutes, that's okay. At that point, I stop and we pass to the next person. So, Caroline, are you ready to take this on?
Sure. I'm a newbie too, and I'm thrilled to be here. I was first published in Verse Virtual in July, so that was awesome. So I have my book here called The Caregiver. My name is Caroline Johnson. This was published in 2008 by Holy Cow Press. They're a small publisher in Duluth, Minnesota. I just want to start out by giving you a few facts about caregiving from the American Psychological Association. Almost a third of the adult U.S. population is a caregiver for an ill or disabled relative. The majority are female, and many are employed part or full time. Family caregivers often face stress and disruption of their own well being and social activities, but there are also rewards associated with it too, and that's really what I found. And I wrote poems through my 10 to 15 year time period of being family caregiver. The book is divided. First section, poems about my father. Second section, poems about my mother. And the last section, poems about grief. My mother suffered from rheumatoid arthritis, Alzheimer's, and she had encephalitis. And my father had a rare, similar to Parkinson's, called multiple systems atrophy. Some of my poems are about have movies in them because I used to watch a lot of films with my parents. My father was a bomber pilot, so I have some poems in there referencing his experience as a pilot. And I also talk a little bit about being an advocate and how important it is to be an advocate for your loved ones when they're going through a difficult time. So I'm just going to read one poem, and this is from the mother section, my mom's section, and it's called Glasses. Sitting in his wheelchair, Father struggles to brush his teeth, sips from an antique green glass, hand-blown by Grandpa, spits into a pink plastic hospital tray. Mother also rinses her mouth with one of Grandpa's vintage juice glasses. After polishing her dentures, she wanders off to bed, her head full of sweet, demented delusions. Earlier, we hunted for her lost hearing aid, searched among socks, drains, under dressers, beds, until we found it, buried deep in the bottom of one of her father's speckled glasses. I tuck them into bed, tell them about a puffin I saw in Alaska. Mother wonders when she will fly away. Is that where we're going? She asks. To Alaska? I can't argue with her logic, merely dim the lights. Who am I to tell her she doesn't have wings? And that's it. Thank you.
That was wonderful. If you would please, after you do your presentation, put a link to where people can buy your book in the chat. And I will save the chat. I use that when I'm getting this video ready for YouTube, so that each of the authors will be listed with a link to where people can find their books. So well into the future, that should be a functional way to do that. And with that, I believe that Marc is ready.
Okay, I think I can do this. Thank you, Jim. Is it okay, or is it that I could share a screen so you guys could read the poem while I read it? Or is it better if I don't do that?
I will have to allow you to do that.
Because I have it on a PDF here, so I mean, it would sort of, it's a long poem.
See if you can share screen with that setting. I just
Sure.
opened it.
All right. All right. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Marc Martino, and I live in Italy. I'm originally from the United States, East Coast. I grew up in Baltimore, actually, and I am currently a reader for the Baltimore Review. Strange how life sometimes comes back in itself. But I've been living in Italy for about 20 years now, and I came here from New York, and so my formative years were spent in New York City. And so this book that I don't know if you guys can see, it's called Still Life with City. This is my new book.
Okay.
It came out from Piskey's Porch in January of this year. It's my second book. My first one is Unburial. And so this book is largely about my experience in New York City in my 20s. So this would be like the mid to late 90s. So kind of a very different New York City than the one that exists now. And so a lot of the poems deal with my experiences then leading up to September 11th. And that's where the title poem is about the September 11th attack and sort of being in New York in that time period and sort of seeing it happen and the aftermath and the fallout from it. And after which, about a year later, I moved here to Italy. And so the second half of the book deals with my life here, I guess you could say. Living in Rome for 8 years, and now I live in Umbria with my family. And so that some of the poems touch on domestic issues, parenting, marriage, stuff like that. So it's kind of all over the place, but there's, I think there's a narrative arc to the book. And so the poem I'd like to read tonight is kind of a long one. I hope I can fit it in the next 4 minutes. It's called Homage to the Italian Language, and it was originally published in Journal of Italian Translation, which is from Brooklyn College. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. It was published in Raintown Review. My bad, last year. And I call it a broken crown because it's 7 sonnets, not 14, but they are linked by last and first lines. And they tell the story of me studying Italian when I was living in New York City and living with a sort of sociopathic, bipolar girlfriend at the time. Anyway, my book is definitely something you must own, as Jim said. So here goes, Homage to the Italian Language. I hope everybody can read it from my screen. Oh, these characters at the top here are Hebrew characters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. So there's kind of a Jewish Italian thing happening here at once. Here goes. At a 3-story brownstone in Manhattan, I learned my first imperatives. At home, I mastered 3 forms of infinitives. Then girlfriend Abigail. So what's the plan? To marry an Italian, move to Rome, give up on us? It's time we took our lives back from each other. You imprison me. I am your jailer. Whatever will be, will be. Song lyrics, an effort to be deep and ease the fractures of our breaking up. Italian helped me focus on the future. The language I was learning was a leap into extended selfhood. Giving up was not an option. Of this, I was sure. Bet. Of one thing I was absolutely sure. Italian was my father's mother tongue, and I would learn it as I learned to walk. On 12th Street, I unearthed a cramped bookstore, the owner a Bostonian and long-winded conversationalist, ad hoc. I never saw another customer in all the afternoons I spent in there. I haunted him because he spoke Italian. The phone would ring and he would answer it. His back turned, I would slip out with my purchase. In class, Regina, a brazen Florentine, would teach equivalents for holy shit and useful phrases like big fucking mess. Gimel. My home life was a great big fucking mess. Abigail tried to slit her veins with shards on New Year's Eve, stranding me in the cold with my Italian. How do you say stress? I mused. Che cazzo graced my lips. The cards were dealt. I had to go. But where? What bold maneuver could I pull from my black hat as if it were a rabbit? There was that brunette I used to see in the Cafe Bianco. I went there strictly for the name on 78th, though schlepping through the snow was last on my list of first things to do. I had the key. I'd go back home. I'd lay the guilt on thick and pitch the winning game. Dalit. New York against itself. The winning game. 2 months or so before her suicide. Yanks riddled Mets with RBIs, home runs. Our Upper East Side sports bar is aflame as Piazza faces his last pitch. Inside Rivera's glove is penned Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And Piazza flies out, iced. We drink too much as usual. Abigail slides off her stool. I drag her home. She wants another beer. I suggest a pizza. We stop at Nino's for a slice. Don't fail me, she mutters. Tell those Italian cunts you're mine. Her jealousy stings. Ammazza. Romans adore the... Hey.
Time's up.
All right.
The fun thing about this is
Thank
that
you.
you've left us with a tease, because now I want to see the rest of it. I want to see the rest of it and read the rest of it.
There are still 3 more sonnets to that.
That's going to be beautiful. Thank you. Next up is Skip.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, everybody, and many thanks to Jim for organizing and hosting these book parties. The book that I'm bringing tonight is Water Under Snow, published back in December by Resource Publications, which is an imprint of Whiffenstock. If the book has a theme, it's the importance of paying attention to the natural world, paying attention to each other, paying attention to our relationship to the natural world. And that theme is stated by W.S. Merwin in my epigraph to the book. I'll read it to you. The world is still here, and there are aspects of human life that are not purely destructive. And there is a need to pay attention to the things around us while they are still around us. And so if the book has a purpose, I'm hoping that reading these poems would make the reader care about the natural world and care about the human relationship to it. The poem I'm going to read is dedicated to my wife, Sally, who I think might be here tonight. And it's called The Photographer. And it has an epigraph from C.S. Lewis from his book, The Four Loves. The only imperative that nature utters is look, listen, attend. the photographer. She isn't trying to save the world as she climbs out of the car and walks toward the rocks. Salvation is in looking, so she pays attention, takes in the muted shades and shapes of granite, subtle humps and sharp edges, gray or beige, backed by the green of spruce, the interspersed white of birches, and out there, the curving surf of the blue Atlantic, where horizon frames the whole. The world's beauty makes no claim to beauty, asks nothing of the viewfinder except her open eyes. What can she do but hold her breath in silence and raise the camera? And I've posted a link to the book on Amazon in the chat in case you're interested. I hope you will be. So thank you. Water
Great.
Under Snow.
Thank you. Next up, we have Robert Knox, who is going to present not a book of poetry, but something fun and different. Bob? You have to unmute.
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
House stories take place outside of New Haven, Connecticut. Yeah, I am a poet. I've been with Verse Virtual since 2015 or some point, but this is a book of short stories, as Jim said. They take place in New Haven, Connecticut in the early 70s when 6 of us were sharing a house. 2 of us are recent Yale grads, one still an undergraduate. The others in these stories are lovers, friends, spouses. Call it autobiographical fiction. That's what they called it when Ernest Hemingway was doing it. Now it's trendy to mix memoir with fiction and call it autofiction. I was hoping to read a couple of brief excerpts. We'll see how far I get. The first is from The Fire, the first story in the book. Somehow Kirby and I end up alone in the house. This is the first sentence of the book. Nevertheless, a party happens because Kirby is a drug dealer, pot and pills, and people just come by. We eventually get to bed, but a candle is left burning, and the sound of a fire in the house wakes us up early in the morning. After we manage to put it out, here's the story's ending. Wow, we were lucky. Then, hard to put behind us, we rehash the whole business. Near victims sharing a close call. I'm glad you pulled the cloth off the table, I say. I couldn't do anything but stare. That's how it grabs you. It's hypnotic. You can see what it does to people. I'm glad you were here. I pulled the cloth down, yeah, but then I was just staring. You were the one who went to get the water. Rice pot? Vase? Impossible to explain how I found it, how hard I found it to clear out the clutter and cut to the act. We make a good team, Kirby says. I nod agreement. When everything's been said, Kirby declares that he has to go back to bed. I've got some business to do later. Deliveries? He starts for the stairs. I'm sorry to see him go. I don't particularly wish to be alone and can't imagine sleeping. Thanks, I call for some reason. He's halfway up the stairs. Thanks for everything. Hey, man, he calls down. I love you. I love you, I reply at once, putting affirmation into my voice, all in. Kirby laughs from the top of the stairs. We can't see each other. I'm still down in the dining room. He laughs again, far out. I can't believe I said that. Me neither. So now the word is out in the open. It's in our vocabulary, the house vocabulary, love, some new idea of love, a wider net. Well, when the rest of the gang comes back from the beach, we'll have a story for them. But will it include those final words? The answer to that question is sort of. And love should be thought of not in the romantic sense here, but as a necessary condition for like full citizenship in the house, in the commune which we're living in. I'm going to try the next one and see how far I get.
You got a minute and a half, Bob.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get most of it then. After driving my recently drug addicted girlfriend, Linny, I'm 23 at this point, she's just out of high school, around town to try to recover items she's lost or left with other people, I take her with me to the local college where my ex-wife is doing her college makeup work in the office belonging to Adam, her former professor, the guy she's now living with. Here's the conclusion to this story entitled Payback. So you're in Adam's office, I observed, indoors on a beautiful day. Linny is so quiet that I forget she's in the room. The women have not greeted each other, and I don't know if they've exchanged glances. Penny gestures at the book on her desk. I have some work to catch up on. Then I get to the real reason I came. So, by the way, I brought you some money. Excuse me, I say, bending to untie a shoelace for the unconventional method of transportation. Surprised into silence, Penny watches me retrieve the cash. Money, she says. The security deposit on the house. We got it back from the landlord. She looks her question. We were going halves back then, remember? A month's rent on the Whitney house, where we moved in with 4 others, and she moved out half a year later. Now our share of the deposit has come back to me. Kirby's, the check sits inside my desk at the house, waiting for me to go to the bank. I slide 520s across the desk. You're going to have to read the book to get the end of it then. I'm almost on the last line.
And it will be delightful. Thank you so much, Bob. And you put the link in, and I've got that.
I had put the link in, yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Next up on our list is Lillian.
Hi there. My name is Lillian Necakov, and I'm coming to you from Toronto, Canada, where it's minus 16 degrees Celsius. I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit, so sorry about that.
Cold, really cold.
Very cold, yeah. I'm going to be reading from my newish book called Irregular. I put the link in the chat, and it was published in April of 2021, so last year, by Anvil Press in Vancouver, Canada. And it's basically a book of 113 poems that I wrote over a period of 78 days during the spring 2020 pandemic lockdown. So I wrote basically either 1 or 2 poems per day, and the poems were actually published in the kind of chronological order that they were written in. So which is kind of neat because you kind of see a progression of what was going on and my feelings and thoughts and whatnot. I've been publishing and writing for a long time. This is my 6th full-length poetry book. I've had stuff published in print and online journals, and my new book is coming out next year from Gornica Editions in the spring. So yeah, so I'll read a piece from Irregular, and that is going to be number 85. Allen Ginsberg climbs up the drain pipe carrying a satchel full of papers. He is Billie Holiday and Miles Davis. He is Lips. He is a singer, a Buddhist, a wavering hope, a twig snapped in half over the back of America. I heard, he says. I heard your loneliness calling me through the prayers of the dead. I heard your small life crack under the weight of snowbirds, northern fauna, hospital beds, and sluggish words, I heard. I heard your fear of the supermarket whispered between joker trees. I heard rumor of broken femurs set in paper mache, while the daffodils spilled over into the street for every stranger's eye, I heard. I heard the scab peeling from your skin like rice paper and promised a promise. I heard the wind break the cadence of your breath as if you were walking a tightrope. I heard you call the calendar Houdini ghost not, I heard. I heard the trembling of your hand pressed against the face of a small child who was now a grown man with hair as black as poppy seed. I heard the bodies fall like missiles and brought you wings. I heard Georgia O'Keeffe's brush rippling over wheat and black iris. I heard her hair as a baptism. I heard Missouri, Texas, Paris, and Nelson Ball in your voice. I heard there is something salvageable waiting for us in the Beat Hotel under the eyes of Shiva. I heard the ashes of the devil in your throat stirring up a wickedness. I heard Burroughs and his junkie hounds howling in your backyard. I heard the magpie conspire with the trickster spring and the knives. I heard the portrait of Dr. Gachet taking you into its fold like a suicide sea. I heard the Orange Hall and Belfast Bridges, Sandy Row crying your troubles. I heard the sunflowers bow to the elements and scatter like lost boys. I once heard. I heard flags burning like stogies between the jowls of motherfucking stooges. I heard the bullshit, the crackling neon, and the skyscrapers wail. I heard the stitches being ripped out. I heard the pages being torn. I heard the bending of numbers. I heard the investigation. I heard the snake. I heard. Thank you.
I have one word to say. Wow,
Yeah, very good.
that was excellent. Now I want to read more. I love the way you've treated the entire concept of the pandemic, and having been in healthcare, some of what you were saying resonates a lot. I do want to mention here that at the initiation of Verse Virtual, Firestone invited people from the community, as they had books published, to contribute a copy of the book to the Verse Virtual library. And after he turned Verse Virtual over to me, as his health was failing, I have kept that tradition alive and will invite you. This is by no means an obligation. This is strictly voluntary. If you would like to contribute a copy of your book to the Verse Virtual Library, I will post my mailing address in the chat comments so that you can do that. And I would very much be appreciative of having that copy. We are now into Ed Ahern.
Okay, thank you. I'll share screen here in a second. I write a lot. I write a lot of poetry. I write a lot of fiction. My fourth poetry book isn't coming out for several more months, so we're going to fall back on the second one, which is called Irregular Images. Came out a couple of years ago. It's about 100 poems. My marketing scheme for the book failed miserably. I priced it down on Amazon, both on the Kindle and the print copy, thinking that would expand sales. And then all the poems in here have been individually published before this ever came out, but I also had them, resubmitted them as reprints, and most of them now have been published several times individually. My thinking was that that would get people to buy the book. It didn't happen. So for all my scheming, I'm back to the book, and I will send one to you, Jim.
Thank you.
This particular poem, where are you, you devil? How about that? It's called Another Me, published a few times now. Another Me. I carry another life with me, not spouse or child. They walk on their own. A conception of my devising, an entity of should and must, an avatar of the required who exists in my stead. Just once I tried to throw him off, to slash his webbing, to be genesis of myself, but the other clung and tangled my intentions, and the moment passed, and he again enveloped me. I carry another on a path I would have forsaken, and I wonder in the quiet times who I would be having cast myself asunder.
I like that. Thank you. And I'll leave, there you go. Excellent, excellent. So individually or not, I do want to see the book. Definitely do. That brings us to Joanne.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. And thanks for hosting these parties. I've been to a couple of them now, and it's just really nice to see the faces that go with the names that I read on Verse Virtual, and also just to hear all these lovely poems. I started participating in Verse Virtual last summer, and I've been writing poetry my whole life, but except for a few poems that I published in some teaching journals, I really never even thought about publishing it for many, many years. But when I retired and then I started wanting to really pursue it. And then the pandemic happened. And as horrible as that was for all of us, it also opened up all kinds of doors to study with poets that I loved and to meet people online and have critique groups and prompt groups and all sorts of stuff. And so I really began writing all through that time and published a bunch of poems in various journals. And one day last summer, I said, I think I have a book. So the book is To Drink from a Wider Bowl. It won the Sinclair Poetry Prize from Evening Street Press in 2021. And it is being published by Evening Street. It's actually, the press date was April 1st, but I've been getting texts all day from people all over the country telling me it arrived. So I guess it was an advance and not an April Fool's book. And the title of the book, To Drink from a Wider Bowl, it is the last line of the first and sort of anchor poem of the book, which is called Old Folks. And the last line of the poem is, we're thirsty still, but drink from a wider bowl. The book reflects through more or less chronological sections, the wider bowl of my life experiences, discoveries, fears, joys, and in going all the way from my ancestors to being a grandparent. Many of my poems, while rooted in my personal experiences, also really relate to explore my relationship with the bigger world around me and the responsibility that I feel as somebody living in this world. I was very honored that poet and anthologist James Cruz wrote one of the blurbs for me in the book, which is also on the Evening Street website, which is where you can purchase the book, as well as two poets from Verse Virtual, Derek Cannemeyer and Cosmos Quarterly's Carolyn Martin, who participated in Verse Virtual at different times. So if you're interested in checking it out, there's a lot about it on the website. Third Wednesday magazine, which some of my poems were published in previously, also did a YouTube reading with me that's about 10 minutes long and has about 6 poems from the book. And that's also posted on eveningstreetpress.com and on my website. And I'll put all that in the chat. The poem that I've chosen to read today is from the last section of the book. It's called Buying a Globe for My Grandson During the Pandemic. I had chosen this poem. I figured I was going to read it even before this week, but the events that are going on in the world, I think, make it even in another dimension. Buying a globe for my grandson during the pandemic. He can't comprehend how north means anything but sky. Thinks south is underground. So I search online, elephants trumpet across Tanzania on talking globes. The Eiffel Tower illuminates all of Europe. Customer reviews dim the flashy displays. Irate Indian buyers, their birthplace mapped as China. Americans demand borders between states, not shown in any other country. Globes crack in careless hands. One globe arrived with 2 southern hemispheres. The owner thought it an improvement, didn't send it back. I long for a brick and mortar store to know if names of distant rivers are large enough to read. Feel the relief of the Himalayas. Spin tilted stands to test their resilience. Lands joined in a blue blur. I'm not giving up the search for a perfect world for my grandson. Thank you.
Excellent. I like that. I've been particularly impressed at the quality and the quantity of poems that have been produced as a result of the pandemic. We're now 2 years in and adding to that, and we're not done yet. It's amazing, but thank you, Joanne. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
We are next going to hear from DeWitt.
Hello there. I'm zooming from a little village just north of Milwaukee across the street. And I'm reading from a new collection from Word Poetry in Cincinnati. Has a nice blue cover. The book is dedicated to all those who've died in the pandemic. Before this book, I was writing poems based on texts, based on art, based on music, paintings, based on historical texts. And so I was more of a poet who thought of himself as an objective poet. But the pandemic around me frightened me greatly. And my wife was also fading in her health. So something about that whole phenomena brought out a very different kind of poet that I didn't recognize. Betsy, who is with us tonight, wrote a wonderful introduction. And Alan has written an introduction to an earlier book. Well, I have a quiz for all of you, or a questionnaire. Would you all raise your hand if you've taken the trash out? Oh, good. So you have some connection. This isn't the title poem, but it's fairly short. And that means it's 2.5 pages. Did you take the trash out, dear? It's late, as you know, or may not know, though you may have a few extra minutes before lights are turned out for all of us. But I seem to remember so many light bulbs are burning out faster than I can find the stepladder to step up into the next layer of light to make the tricky turns so as to not separate the bulb from the screwy as I've done this and find I'm now down in the basement with flashlight, looking at the updated fuse box to see which has flipped, even slightly flipped. For these days, unless you're the expert, it's harder and harder to tell, but that's not really why we're here, is it? As I sensed everything important is slowing down. But please don't call anyone, as that'd be embarrassing, but don't you too feel something is just not right anymore? As the light seems to be dimming all around, not just in our little brick house, which has ample lighting, of course, but I'll admit I'm walking slower than I have. And when I do, I sense a slight tilting or drifting, as it's hard to stay on that fine line, looking a bit screwy, like I've had too much to drink, which might be true, but then the zigging and zagging of walking down the block happens even without evening refreshments. And another thing that is odd is that the plates are a bit smaller than they used to be. And I'm no problem with that, just that the appetite is like the smaller plate. And we've gone to plastic spoons, which I'm not sure, but the wife says they're pretty, aren't they? And I do agree, but there's something out there. Don't you see it too? That's making everything a bit dimmer, duller. Or perhaps it's just that time of the year when all the snow has turned into a dirty gray pile. But I'm quite optimistic. Not about any of this, but just pressing the old nose up close to something, even if it is sniffing out what's what, as in what's that, yet I don't remember that being there. Wasn't it over there? But maybe these things don't even bother you, and they don't exactly bother me, but there's just something which I can't quite take out to the trash. But even if I did take out what stinks so, it'd be sitting on the curb for over a week. And then a neighbor would walk by and wonder what kind of bad that old bloke is trying to pull over, though no one has a nerve so far to call the local sheriff to see if someone else might move what seems so horribly wrong right there But can't you see it too? It's right there. And I don't really have too much more time with what seems so off, as the Brits sometimes say, when something isn't as fresh as it could be. But then nothing quite appears anymore to be quite what it could be, does it? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Interesting take on taking out the trash. I like the shift in your writing. So that brings us, unless Patricia Carney is here and I have missed her, that brings us to the end of our list. My absolute thanks to all of you who participated today, and I do hope that this will generate some sales for you. Sometimes the only people who buy poetry are other poets. I'm very much aware of that, but I hope we can help you get a little larger audience. What I'm going to do now is switch back to gallery view. I am going to stop the recording because we are done with this portion of things.